Nobody's being represented properly apart from the super rich. And if you take the press, the Express, the Telegraph, the Mail, the Sun, all these people that are owned by super rich oligarchs, they represent their class interests. They represent what they want, which is the status quo, where the super wealthy are protected all of the time and insulated from the problems that the rest of us face. And that's got to change. But we'll keep plugging away. You know, people make me out as the Grinch and out as, what was it, an international centre of evil or something like that. I'm just an ordinary fella like everyone else. I want a bit of industrial harmony if I can get it. But we're not prepared to just lie down and take everything that the rich and the employers and the government throw at us.
I might just start by asking you how long it's taken us to get here this morning and the delays. I thought it was a strike day. What's going on the rails?
Well, there seems to have been a massive disruption last night on the Avanti West Coast, enormous amount of problems. They've got problems every day of the week. They've cut their service down to COVID levels, and even on that, they've got massive delays, massive cancellations. And last night they had some engineering cancellations. It just shows you how finely balanced our railway is. If something goes wrong in one part of the network, it soon collapses into disarray, and the public must have been even more disappointed, I suppose, on a normal day where there's no industrial action, that they were highly disrupted. And this morning we've got, on the Western region, massive disruptions due to engineering failures. And what the companies are telling us, of course, is that you can cut back on maintenance. There's no risk, but we'll have to see. We've been here before with Railtrack in the 90s, where they cut everything to the bone and the railway went into disarray, and finally we had these massive and tragic accidents that cost people's lives and led to change on the railway, but we seem to be going back that way.
And that's part of the dispute?
Yeah, the dispute, everybody talks about pay, but the dispute is about a number of things. It's about the conditions our members work on, but the precursor for them to make these cuts, to cut thousands of jobs and cut billions of pounds or millions of pounds out of the system, is cutting the maintenance safety regime. So what are called maintenance scheduled tasks, the work that the people out in Orange do on the track every day, is being cut by 50%. And what that means is they just leave the infrastructure alone for longer, don't go out and inspect it, don't do the on-the-job repairs and wait till it fails. It's called risk-based maintenance rather than planned preventative maintenance. Now that's very boring and tedious for the average punter, but this is a really safety critical environment, and they're taking risks with people's safety and the future of the infrastructure. We've got a Victorian infrastructure, some of it nearly 200 years old now, that needs constant maintenance. And if you don't do that, it's quickly going to deteriorate.
I mean, the Transport Secretary was in front of a select committee where he told them that actually billions have been invested into the railways. Is that not true? Well,
billions need to be invested. It is true that there is a constant investment in the railway, but most of that is to prop up bridges, tunnels, cuttings, and the track bed of what the trains run on, because that stuff was put down by Victorians, some cases back to the 1830s. So it always needs investment, like any piece of infrastructure, whether it's motorways, airports, whatever you want to name, or the sewage system. You can't just leave it alone. It needs constant renewal. So there is investment, but it's got to be at a rate that supports the network. And that's the same whether it's schools or hospitals or council services or whatever. You need to keep spending money at the right rates. And if you don't tax people properly, you won't have the money. So that's where we are.
You were under a bit of flack this morning for allegedly having taken away Christmas. The dispute, though, on the 24th, 5th and 6th, that's not passenger-facing, that dispute?
No, our aim was not to have any interference with the Christmas passenger services, so we've held off from that as much as possible. The railway runs down on Christmas Eve and closes for a long period to do engineering work, and then it's run down between Christmas and New Year on very limited services. So we have to take action against the impositions that Network Rail are putting up. There's still another fortnight to go or more before that particular strike action is in place. So the companies can come to us with proposals, and that strike is only Network Rail workers. There's no passenger trains running anyway. So we do regret that the service will run down a bit quicker than normal, but it is running down from midday on Christmas Eve anyway, so people will have to amend their plans, and we're sorry for that, but we have to make this action as effective as possible, so our operations and engineering members on Network Rail will take strike action through that period, because we want to put Network Rail under pressure so that they come up with a better deal.
There is a BBC article this morning in which the state broadcaster has interviewed quite a few passengers who say they can't get home for Christmas now. Do you feel guilty about that?
Well, I feel troubled about it. I don't like it. I don't like doing that to people, and none of our members want to do that to people. But if we don't respond in a way that's appropriate, our members will lose their jobs and they'll have their terms and conditions ripped up. And the time is now, because on December the 15th, they're starting the process to implement these changes, which includes those safety changes that I've talked about, but also the changes to our members' terms and conditions, the way they're deployed on the railway, and they will start issuing redundancy notices. So we don't choose this time. We've been trying to resolve this since the beginning of the year, and we haven't got there. So I do understand that, and hopefully people can amend their plans, and maybe some of those businesses that people work for can cut them a break and let them away early. The train services will be running until mid-evening and a bit beyond. So hopefully they can get their travel plans sorted out in time.
Do you think you've been fairly represented in the media?
Well, I understand that the media doesn't like the RMT, and there's a broad front of people against us. If you take the whole range of mainstream media, it's always predicated on basically company and government press releases almost spat out verbatim by journalists without any question as to what the motivations of the government are. They just take this idea that there's no money in this country. And when I walk about the place, I see plenty of evidence of vast wealth in this country. And the problem is it's not redistributed. It's not given to the right people. The people that create wealth in our society and in our civilization are not getting the right deal. Now that includes our members, but it includes thousands of people in the private sector, millions of people in the public services. So we're just not being paid enough to get by. And they're also under a lot of stress. If you listen to what health workers are saying at the moment, they're saying that the stress levels working in the NHS, from consultant level down to kitchen porters, is at an all-time high, and they need a better reward for what they're doing. They need more investment. So nobody's being represented properly apart from the super rich. And if you take the press, the Express, the Telegraph, the Mail, the Sun, all these people that are owned by super rich oligarchs, they represent their class interests. They represent what they want, which is the status quo, where the super wealthy are protected all of the time and insulated from the problems that the rest of us face. And that's got to change. But we'll keep plugging away. You know, people make me out as the Grinch and out as, what was it, an international centre of evil or something like that. I'm just an ordinary fella like everyone else. I want a bit of industrial harmony if I can get it. But we're not prepared to just lie down and take everything that the rich and the employers and the government throw at us.
From what you've just said, if you look at the case of Baroness Morone, who's the Tory peer who allegedly benefited from Tory contracts, who do you think stands to gain in modern Britain? Who are the winners?
Well, the winners are those that are on the inside track, aren't they? I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but people act in their own interests. So if you take what went on during COVID, there was mass corruption. And Baroness Morone is just an example of it. She happens to be a woman of working class background, so maybe they've picked her out, or maybe she represents some archetype that the rich put forward. Now, she's got to account for that, but there are countless other people hiding behind company names. People in Matt Hancock's pub, I understand it, got PPE contracts and other contracts. But there's corruption all over our society. The railway is a completely corrupted setup where the train operating companies are being paid every day that we are out on strike. Everybody loses money. The businesses, people are disrupted. My members lose money. The only people that don't lose money are the train operating companies. They get paid their wages all the time. And if you take the disruption that's on there today and yesterday and is on most days when we're not on strike, the train operating companies who are responsible for that are completely insulated, and the government is passing taxpayer and fair payer money directly to these people to enhance their wealth. So the people that are losing out is the ordinary Joe out there on the street who's trying to go about their daily life despite all the pressures. And it's skewed against them. And what the trade unions are doing is trying to stand up for those people. And it's about time more people, I think, recognise what the trade unions are fighting for and joined with us in these campaigns to make this country a better place to live in.
One of the integral demands that you have in your negotiation is about driver-only operations. For women and people who perhaps are disabled, who need extra help, I mean, how important are guards on the trains?
Well, I think guards are vitally important. They're vital to the operation of the railway. Having a guard on a train is a proven safe system of work. And their job is to be the advocate of the passenger. So the driver is there to drive the train under the rules, but the guard is there to be the advocate and the protector of the passenger. That's at the point of departure and arrival. Also when the train's in operation. So last night at Euston, we had a mass evacuation of a train in the dark, with overhead electricity running, with trains halted and people who could be in disarray. So the role of the guard is to protect those people under the rules. But also during ordinary service, when it's late at night and there might be less people around, the guard is there to make sure the welfare of the passengers is looked after. Women who might be travelling alone, people who might have impairments and difficulty moving around, people who might just feel insecure. It's great to have a guard there, and sometimes people move towards where the guard might be stationed so that they feel that there's somebody there to protect them, is connected up to the communication system, can get the police, or just provide a presence for the other travellers on that service that they can guarantee. So I think that a lot of people, including women, find it really important that there's a guard on there, and women should have accessible services, but so should everybody else. You don't have to be a woman to feel slightly vulnerable on a late night train service. And I remember in this town, during the 80s, before Livingston came in as mayor, our stations were completely depopulated, and many people felt frightened to use the services. And we've changed that now. Everything's a bit brighter. The station staffing is assured these days. So we want a system that is friendly, welcoming, and safe, that people want to use, and we need that for the purposes of stopping congestion, for the environment. We need a public transport system that people can rely on and feel comfortable in. So that's what the Guard and other railway staff do on behalf of the people that use it.
There's a huge campaign for violence against women and girls currently running on a lot of the services that you represent. Do you think the government care enough about women? Do you think it's all bluster, it's all advertising? Yeah,
well, they've completely forgotten that. The stuff that we had over the last couple of years where women are being attacked when they're walking alone on the streets, or even feeling vulnerable, it don't have to result in an attack to feel uncomfortable in an environment. Now, being on a train, a public service, is an environment where you should feel welcomed and safe. And they disregard that. There's a lot of words around at the time of an incident. There's a lot of positive statements. But when it comes to cuts, they just cut things to the bone. And all these statements that they make at the time of an incident are all forgotten because they don't experience it. If you think Rishi Sunak and Mark Harper are using train services out to remote parts of the country at 11:30 at night, having come off a shift, you've got another thing coming. That's just not the way they live, and it's not an environment they were brought up in. But the rest of us have to use these services, and we want them to be properly staffed and properly funded.
Just finally, I just wanted to talk about the prospect of a general strike. Do you think that would be more helpful to your negotiations if there was more coordination?
Well, I definitely think there needs to be coordination between trade unions. The government is at the source of all of these problems at the moment. It's down to public funding of public services. If you take the ambulance workers who are going to be out soon, education, health, and all the other services that are provided, it's the government that's at the heart of it. And if you look at where the other governments are that are outside the control of Westminster, in Scotland they've settled the public services almost completely. They've settled on rail, they've settled on the council workers, and I think they're moving towards the health services in Scotland. And we've settled all the railway disputes in Scotland. It's the same in Wales, where they've got devolved authority. And certainly in the railway services, we've settled on Merseyrail, we've settled in Newcastle, and in London to a large extent, where the DfT doesn't run, for instance. But we need a generalised response. Whether we can get a general strike or not is a matter of waiting to see what develops. But I definitely think there will be generalised action as we go through into the new year if these disputes aren't resolved. And the RMT will be there with people. Whether this current dispute is still running, then I don't know. But we will certainly be with the nurses, with everyone, the health workers, the teachers. Everyone that's fighting for a square deal will be there next to them, giving them our support whenever we can.